We left Jamaica in 1981 after the political situation got out of control and the economy started tanking. We came to America with nothing but our suitcases, no furniture, no real plans, but some friends of my father convinced him to move to San Francisco. Once we got to realize that America wasn't necessarily the land of milk and honey, that it was going to be tough. It was going to be really tough. We lived with some friends for a few months, and eventually my parents were able to get work, and we moved into a small, cold house. I remember when we had our first meal in that house, and my father sat on a carpenter's horse, an old raggedy carpenter's horse that was in the backyard of the house that we were renting. And my mother, my sister, and I sat on 3 rusty little chairs that we'd found somewhere. So I wonder why my father, who worked so hard, didn't seem to prosper. He worked 2 jobs, long hours, jobs that he was way overqualified for, and we were struggling. So it wasn't enough that you worked hard. My father was smart and he worked hard, but we weren't making money. And I thought that's what working was about, was making money. When I got a little older, I realized that I was interested in certain fields of study that also happened to pay handsomely. So I said, hey, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to study something that I can enjoy, but that also pays well. When I got to college, I didn't necessarily have the study habits to pursue the field of study that I had chosen. I chose medicine, and I really didn't have the ability to focus enough to study hard for that. So my roommate and I opened the book of majors from my college and just started thumbing through alphabetically, looking at possible career choices for me. Well, we started with art, I think automotive technology, and we came to aviation. I said, aviation? Oh, wait a minute, that's flying. That sounds pretty cool. I think I can do that. So I started taking flight lessons there at the school while I was working full-time in college. So I was taking 12 credits, working about 50 hours a week, and trying to learn how to fly at the same time. It kind of worked out. It worked out, in fact, that I had money in my pocket, and I was able to pay for my flight lessons. But I had begun working on the Sabbath, which is something I had never considered before in my life. I didn't feel good about it, but like any other sin, after a while you kind of get a little numb to it. Eventually, however, I got another job that didn't pay as much, but allowed me to have the Sabbaths free. About that, I was pretty happy. So I decided to push forward with the flying. And never once did I think about asking God for his advice or for his guidance. I didn't ask my parents for their guidance or advice. I didn't ask any other adults, anybody who had more experience than I did. I was a typical type A person who just felt self-assured and felt that I could do whatever I wanted to do. I didn't need anybody's guidance or approval to do it. So one day a friend of mine convinced me to leave California and go to Florida to flight school. Within a matter of 2 or 3 hours, I'd made up my mind without thinking, without asking anybody, just made up my mind to go to this flight school. So that's what I did. Packed up all my belongings in my car, and 5 days later I was in Florida in flight school. Having not asked God for any guidance, I just continued with flight school. Sometimes I go to school on Sabbath. I never even thought about mentioning my religious affiliation. And then even when I had Sabbaths free from school or training, I wouldn't even go to church anymore, which is something I'd always done. And it wasn't intentional, it just kind of happened. Well, I reached my goals. I finished flight school, I taught for a couple of years, and then I went to the airlines. All the while never considering the Sabbath, never making it a priority, and never asking God for his guidance. After a couple of years at the airlines, I decided that I thought I wanted to find someone to settle down with and maybe have a wife someday. So I started trying to date a Christian woman. She had the nerve to tell me, being an Adventist, I would choose a career that didn't require or didn't cause any conflicts with the Sabbath. A job that I could have and still observe the Sabbath and glorify God. And then I changed aircraft and had to go through training again, which is never pleasant, but the Sabbath came up as an issue because we had classes on Sabbath. And I feebly, weakly just went along with it. I went to class on Sabbath. I didn't feel good about it. A manager asked me, or told me that I had to choose between being an airline pilot or continuing with my religion, because I was in the wrong field if I wanted to keep the Sabbath. And then I decided I was going to put it in his hands, and whatever he had in store for me, I was willing to accept. I told the training officer, I don't care what you do, I'm not going to show up on Sabbath. So they actually modified my training schedule so that I could be there, on Sunday instead. Well, but they also told me that we'll do this one time now, but later on when you start flying the plane again, you're going to have to suck it up and take whatever comes your way in terms of a schedule. Well, I got through that stumbling block or that hurdle, got over it, and started flying again, and things were looking up. I was flying a bigger airplane, getting paid decent money, and I figured the American dream was within my grasp, and all that my parents had sacrificed to bring us to this country for was going to come to fruition. It was going to happen because I was going to make good money, and I was going to be in a position where I could do something, invest, or start a business to help my parents retire quickly, and we're going to live the good life. So I kept on flying, and I was doing okay until my schedule required that I work on Sabbath, which I just wasn't going to do. So I called in sick for one occasion, and the next occasion I used some excuse, but I was able to get out of it. And then finally, I couldn't think of any more excuses. So I told my supervisors, listen, I'm just not going to work on Sabbath, whatever you do. So I told my wife that I wasn't willing to sit here and fight about this anymore. I didn't want to worry about keeping the Sabbath for the rest of my career. I didn't want to deal with it anymore. I didn't want to live away from my wife and my children. I knew that was a lifestyle that wasn't going to be healthy for me or for them. So I said, I think I'm going to quit. And my wife wasn't happy at that moment either. And here we were on the cusp of achieving the American dream, and I told my wife that all those dreams were going to have to be put on hold for several years. I didn't know how they were going to get achieved, but I knew I wasn't going to keep doing what I was doing. And it was tough. It was a tough decision to make. I didn't consult with a whole lot of people, but I asked God, I said, God, just guide me. Whatever you want for my life, I'll do it. And that was again one of the few times in my life that I really put things in God's hands. And I said, I know I'm giving up a whole lot. No matter what happens, I'm going to give up a whole lot now, but it's for a greater reward in the end. Well, my wife is a paramedic, so she introduced me to paramedicine. She said, why don't you take some classes? You might like it. So I did. I took some classes. I tested for various jobs, and I applied for the simplest jobs that I thought way overqualified for, but no one even called me back. I wanted just a part-time job so I could pay for my school, but no one called me back. No one. That was the first time in my 30-plus years of life that I'd ever had difficulty getting a job. I'd always gotten every job I applied for, interviewed for, no problem. Never had a problem. This first time in my life, I was without a job, without job prospects, and wondering, how life was going to get better, if ever at all. And once again, I said, I just have to pray and put things in God's hands, because there's nothing I can do at this point on my own. So if I put it in God's hands, I'm sure He'll guide, and He has guided, and I've been blessed. My family's been blessed. I want to encourage anybody out there who's thinking about what they want to do for a living, or who they want to marry, or where they want to live, to put that and all major decisions in God's hands, because God knows what's best for you ultimately. And just trust that He'll take care of you, period. My name is Marvin Barrett, and this is The Real Me.